The knife sliced through the onion with practiced precision as I tried to ignore the dull ache in my lower back. 5 hours of cleaning had taken its toll, but the kitchen gleamed like it hadn't in months. The sound of the front door opening made me pause, wiping my hands on my apron. "Olivia? Are you home?" Daniel's voice echoed through our 3-bedroom suburban home, a house that had once felt like a dream, but now seemed more like elegant imprisonment. "In the kitchen," I called back, forcing a smile as my husband of 7 years appeared in the doorway. At 42, Daniel Chen still turned heads with his athletic build and the confident way he carried himself. The slight graying at his temples only added to his appeal, something his mother never failed to point out. He crossed the room and planted a quick kiss on my cheek, the scent of unfamiliar perfume lingering faintly beneath his usual cologne. I pretended not to notice. "Something smells amazing," he said, eyeing the half-chopped vegetables on the cutting board. "Just prepping for dinner." "How was your day?" I asked, the same question I'd been asking for 7 years, receiving increasingly vague answers over the past 6 months. "Good, productive." "Listen, my mother's stopping by in about 20 minutes. She wants to discuss something with us." I stiffened. Eleanor Chen's discussions were rarely actual discussions, more like pronouncements we were expected to accept without question. On a Tuesday evening? "Is everything okay?" Daniel waved dismissively. "Everything's fine. She's just excited about my birthday coming up," I nodded, remembering the elaborate spreadsheet I'd created 3 weeks ago. Planning his birthday celebration, restaurant reservations, a custom-made watch I'd saved for months to afford, a weekend getaway to the coastal bed and breakfast where we'd spent our honeymoon, all carefully hidden in a password-protected folder on my laptop. The doorbell rang precisely 20 minutes later. Eleanor Chen didn't believe in arriving early or late, only exactly on time, a trait she'd instilled in her only son. "Olivia, darling." She greeted me with air kisses that never quite touched my cheeks. At 68, she remained immaculately preserved, her tailored pantsuit and precisely applied makeup a testament to her refusal to surrender to age. "Daniel," she said warmly, embracing her son with genuine affection before handing him a small shopping bag. "Just a little something I picked up today." Watched as Daniel pulled out an Italian leather wallet that likely cost more than my entire month's salary from the community college where I taught art history. "You shouldn't have, Mom," he said, but his pleased smile suggested he felt entirely deserving of such spontaneous gifts. Nonsense. "Now shall we sit? I have exciting news." We moved to the living room, Eleanor claiming her usual spot on our cream-colored sofa. I perched on the edge of the armchair, feeling like a guest in my own home. "As you know, Daniel's 50th birthday is in 5 days, Eleanor began, ignoring my subtle correction that he was turning 43. "And I've decided it's time for a proper celebration. Not just dinner at some restaurant, but a real party. Here, at your home." My carefully planned surprise crumbled in an instant. "Oh, I actually had some plans already. Whatever you've planned can surely be incorporated," Eleanor said dismissively. "But this needs to be special. I'm thinking 50 guests minimum. Catering from Bellini's, flowers from Palmer's, and perhaps that jazz quartet Daniel loves." I glanced at my husband, expecting him to mention the private plans we'd discussed months ago, how he wanted something intimate this year. Just the two of us. Instead, he nodded enthusiastically. "That sounds amazing, Mom." "But Daniel, we talked about—" "Olivia," Eleanor interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. "Daniel works so hard. He deserves to be celebrated properly. Besides, you're always saying you want to entertain more. That wasn't true. I'd never said any such thing." But before I could object, Eleanor continued. "I've already made some preliminary calls. The caterer needs final numbers by tomorrow. I'm thinking heavy hors d'oeuvres, an open bar, and of course a proper cake." 5 days isn't much time to plan something this elaborate, I said carefully. Eleanor smiled. "That's why we have you, dear. You're so good at organizing things. And don't worry about the expense. Daniel and I will handle everything. You just need to coordinate the details." I looked at Daniel again, silently pleading for him to step in, to remind his mother that this was our home, our life. He checked his watch. This all sounds perfect, Mom. Liv, you'll make it amazing. I know you will. He stood up. I actually need to jump on a conference call in 5 minutes. Can we finalize details tomorrow? Eleanor rose gracefully. Of course, darling. I'll email you both my guest list tonight. As Daniel escorted his mother out, I sat frozen, staring at the space where my carefully crafted birthday plans had just been demolished. The spreadsheet on my laptop now seemed like a sad joke, a reminder that my role in my husband's life was increasingly peripheral. When Daniel returned, he seemed surprised to find me still sitting there. Everything okay? No, everything is not okay, I said quietly. I had plans for your birthday. Plans I've been working on for months. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I'm sure whatever you planned can be part of this larger celebration. A romantic weekend away can be part of a party for 50 people? Daniel sighed. Liv, you know how much my mother enjoys these things. And honestly, it'll be good for us to entertain. Most of these people will be from the firm. It's networking as much as celebration. So this is about work, not your birthday. It can be about both. He checked his watch again. I really do need to take this call. We can talk more later, okay? Without waiting for my response, he headed to his home office, closing the door firmly behind him. I returned to the kitchen, picking up my knife to finish chopping vegetables for a dinner that would now be eaten cold. As the blade came down with more force than necessary, I couldn't help but wonder when exactly I had become an afterthought in my own marriage. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed and a notification chime from my phone. Eleanor had indeed emailed her guest list overnight, 73 names, complete with dietary restrictions and suggested seating arrangements. Daniel had already replied with his enthusiastic approval and added 5 more colleagues to the list. Neither had asked for my input. I wrapped myself in my robe and padded to the kitchen, where I found a hastily scrawled note from Daniel. Early meeting, back late. Love you. The period after love you seemed perfunctory, like an obligation rather than a sentiment. I crumpled the note and tossed it into the recycling bin before pouring myself a cup of coffee and opening my laptop. If I was going to coordinate this party, I needed to be organized. I created a new spreadsheet, trying to ignore the one still saved in my documents, the one with reservations and surprises now rendered meaningless. My phone rang as I was researching caterers. Eleanor had mentioned Bellini's, but they were notoriously expensive and typically booked months in advance. Good morning. Olivia, Eleanor's crisp voice greeted me. I trust you received my email? Yes, just looking through it now. Eleanor, I'm not sure Bellini's can accommodate us on such short notice. Already taken care of. I spoke with Marco this morning. They had a cancellation for Saturday evening. They'll need the final menu by noon today. I blinked in surprise. That's efficient. When you know the right people, things tend to fall into place. Now, about the flowers. I can handle that, I said quickly, needing to maintain some control over the situation. Wonderful. Daniel mentioned you're not teaching this week? Perfect timing. You'll have plenty of time to coordinate everything. I bit back a response about my research project deadline, due next week. Yes, I'll manage. Excellent. Oh, and the guest list may grow slightly. Daniel is inviting some important clients. How slightly? Perhaps another 20 people? Nothing you can't handle, I'm sure. Almost 100 guests. In our home. In 5 days. Eleanor, our house isn't really equipped for that many. Darling, that's why we rent tents and heaters for the backyard. I've taken the liberty of contacting Event Solutions. They'll be sending someone to assess the space this afternoon around 2. I glanced at the clock. It was just past 9 a.m. I have a video meeting at 2. Surely you can reschedule. This is for Daniel's birthday, after all. The implied message was clear. Nothing in my professional life could possibly be as important as Daniel's celebration. I'll figure something out, I said, knowing I would have to apologize to my research partner for the last-minute change. Perfect. Now I'm thinking a color scheme of navy and silver. So classic, don't you agree? For the next 30 minutes, Eleanor outlined her vision for the party while I took notes, occasionally managing to interject a suggestion that was either approved with faint surprise or gently dismissed. By the time we hung up, I had a to-do list that would have challenged a professional event planner with a full team, let alone one person with less than a week to execute it. I spent the rest of the morning calling vendors, rescheduling my academic commitments, and trying to transform Eleanor's grand vision into something actually achievable in our modest suburban home. The doorbell rang precisely at 2 o'clock. A young woman with a tablet and measuring tape introduced herself as Jen from Event Solutions. "Mrs. Chen, I'm here to assess the space for Saturday's event." "It's actually Dr. Reeves Chen," I corrected automatically, then immediately felt petty. "But please call me Olivia." Jen looked momentarily confused. "I'm sorry, I was told to meet with Mrs. Eleanor Chen. She's my mother-in-law. She's not here right now." "Oh." Jen checked her tablet. "She's listed as the primary contact and decision-maker for this event." I felt a flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. "This event is at my home for my husband's birthday. I'll be making the decisions." Jen nodded diplomatically. "Of course. Shall we start with the backyard?" For the next hour, we walked through the house and yard, discussing tent placements, power requirements, and weather contingencies. Jen was professional and thorough, but I couldn't shake the humiliation of discovering that Eleanor had positioned herself as the client, not me. As Jen was preparing to leave, my phone rang. Daniel's office number. "Excuse me, I need to take this," I said, stepping away. "Hello? Olivia? It's Marissa, Daniel's assistant." The young woman's voice sounded harried. "Mr. Chen asked me to call you about the party preparations." "Yes?" "He wanted to confirm that you've secured the jazz quartet his mother recommended. Apparently, they're quite in demand, and he's concerned about availability." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "I haven't had a chance to contact them yet. I've been dealing with the caterer and the event rental company." "Oh." Marissa's disappointment was palpable. "Mr. Chen specifically mentioned the importance of the music. He's invited the managing partners, and apparently Mr. Goldstein is a jazz enthusiast." Of course. This was about impressing Daniel's bosses. "I'll call them right away." "Great. Also, Mr. Chen wanted to know if you've confirmed the specialty whiskey tasting. His mother suggested it would be a nice touch." This was the first I'd heard of any whiskey tasting. "I'll look into that as well." "Perfect. Mr. Chen says to spare no expense." "This needs to be impressive." Marissa's voice lowered slightly. "Between us, I think he's up for partner this year." After ending the call, I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by party planning notes, feeling increasingly like a contractor hired to execute someone else's vision, rather, than a spouse planning a celebration for her husband. I was about to call the jazz quartet when my phone chimed with a text message from Eleanor. "Forgot to mention, Daniel loves that chocolate ganache cake from Pâtisserie Laurent. Could you order one?" 100 people. "Thanks, dear. Laurent's required 3 weeks' notice for custom cakes." With a sigh, I added, "Perform baking miracle" to my growing list of impossible tasks. By Thursday morning, 2 days before the party, I was running on caffeine and determination. The vendors had been confirmed, the backyard transformed with an elegant tent and heating system, and by some miracle, and a substantial rush fee, Pâtisserie Laurent had agreed to create Daniel's cake. Daniel had been conspicuously absent, claiming a major case required late nights at the office. When he did come home, he'd ask perfunctory questions about the party preparations before retreating to his office to review briefs. I was in the middle of confirming the final delivery schedule with the rental company when my laptop battery died. Cursing under my breath, I realized I'd left my charger in Daniel's office the previous night when I'd been working while he slept. His office door was closed, as usual. I knocked lightly, and when there was no response, I entered, spotting my charger plugged in behind his desk. As I reached for it, my elbow knocked a stack of papers to the floor. Sighing, I knelt to gather them, noticing they were printouts of email exchanges. I was about to return them to the desk when a name caught my eye. Vivian Zhao. Vivian was a junior associate at Daniel's firm, beautiful, brilliant, and 15 years his junior. She'd been to our home for dinner once, about 8 months ago, when Daniel had mentioned mentoring promising new talent. My hand trembled slightly as my eyes scanned the email. D. Meeting confirmed at the usual place. 8 p.m. I've booked the room through Sunday. Can't wait to celebrate your birthday properly, just the two of us. The timestamp was from yesterday. My stomach clenched as I flipped through more pages, finding dinner reservations, hotel confirmations, and intimate exchanges that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The most recent email, sent this morning, outlined their weekend plans: a getaway to the coastal bed and breakfast where Daniel and I had spent our honeymoon, the same place I had planned to surprise him with for his birthday. A second printout showed a confirmation for Eleanor's flight to visit her sister in Phoenix. Departing Friday night, the evening before the party, they were planning to leave me alone to host a party for nearly 100 people while they escaped for a romantic weekend. Sat on the floor of my husband's office, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, feeling oddly calm. 7 years of marriage reduced to printouts and plans that didn't include me. My phone chimed with a text from Eleanor. Don't forget to pick up Daniel's mother's medication before the party. And make sure the caterers know about Mr. Goldstein's shellfish allergy. I stared at the message, then back at the papers in my hands. Neither of them saw me as a partner, or even a person. Just a convenient assistant to manage their lives while they pursued their actual priorities. I carefully replaced the papers, retrieved my charger, and closed the office door behind me. In the kitchen, I made myself a cup of tea and opened my laptop again. But instead of returning to party preparations, I opened a new browser window and began to research. First, our financial accounts, joint and separate. Then Daniel's firm's partner structure and compensation system. Finally, Eleanor's trust fund, which she'd always held over our heads as both carrot and stick. 3 hours later, I had a complete picture of the financial web that bound our lives together, and a plan forming that would change everything. Friday morning arrived with a flurry of deliveries. Chairs, additional tables, linens, and the specialty bar setup for the whiskey tasting were all scheduled to arrive throughout the day. The florist would come in the afternoon, and the caterers would do their final site visit at 4. I greeted each vendor with a smile, confirming details and placement with a newfound clarity of purpose. The night before, I'd barely slept, my mind racing with calculations and contingencies. Daniel appeared in the kitchen around 7, dressed immaculately in one of his designer suits. "Everything on track for tomorrow?" he asked, pouring himself coffee. "Absolutely," I replied, sliding a piece of paper across the counter. "Just need your signature on the final payment for the tent rental." He signed without reading, as I knew he would. "Looks like it's coming together. Mom called this morning. She's thrilled with how you've handled everything." "I'm sure she is." I took the signed form and folded it carefully. "What time will you be home tonight?" Daniel's eyes flickered away momentarily. "Actually, I need to work late again. Major filing deadline for the Westbrook case." "Don't wait up, of course." "And your mother? Is she still coming over to help with final preparations?" She actually had to fly to Phoenix. Her sister had a minor health scare." I nodded sympathetically. "How concerning. I hope she's all right. Mom says it's nothing serious, but you know how she is about family." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. "Family is everything," I agreed. "Will your mother be back for the party tomorrow?" Daniel checked his watch, a tell I'd come to recognize when he was lying. "She's going to try, but she might not make it back in time. She said not to worry. You've got everything under control." "How convenient," I murmured. "What was that?" "How confident she is in me," I corrected with a smile. "Will you be around tomorrow morning to help with the setup?" He grimaced apologetically. "I really need to finish this brief. I'll probably head to the office early, but I promise I'll be back by 5 to help with final touches before guests arrive at 7. "Perfect," I said, pouring myself more coffee. "Everything will be ready for you when you return." Daniel kissed my cheek distractedly. "You're the best. Liv, I don't know what I'd do without you. I've been wondering the same thing myself lately." He didn't seem to register the edge in my voice as he grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door. See you tomorrow. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I moved to my laptop and opened a series of tabs I'd prepared the night before. For the next hour, I made calls and sent emails, putting the final pieces of my plan into motion. At noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a middle-aged woman with a practical haircut and a no-nonsense blazer. Dr. Reeves Chen? I'm Denise Harmon from Secure Financial Investigations. We spoke on the phone yesterday. I ushered her in quickly. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I have all the documents ready for you to review. You mentioned potential financial impropriety involving your husband's business accounts? I led her to the dining room, where I'd arranged folders containing printouts of the information I'd gathered. Yes, but it's more complicated than that. Please have a seat. We don't have much time. For the next 2 hours, Denise reviewed the documents while I explained my suspicions and findings. Occasionally, she would nod or make notes, her expression becoming increasingly grave. Dr. Reeves Chen, if what you're showing me is accurate, this isn't just unethical, it's potentially criminal. I know, I said quietly. And please call me Olivia. Olivia, have you considered what this will mean? For you, for your marriage? I looked around at our home, being transformed for a party that was never really about celebrating Daniel. My marriage ended the moment I found those emails. Now it's just a question of how I walk away. Denise nodded. I can have a preliminary report ready by tomorrow morning, but a full forensic accounting will take longer. Tomorrow morning is perfect. That gives me time for the next step. After Denise left, I made one more call to a number I'd found in Daniel's contact list, labeled simply VZ. When a woman's voice answered, I spoke calmly. Vivian? This is Olivia Chen, Daniel's wife. We need to talk. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought Vivian might have hung up. Mrs. Chen, she finally said, her voice carefully neutral. What can I do for you? I think we both know why I'm calling, I replied, keeping my tone equally measured. But this isn't a confrontation. It's a proposition. Another pause. I'm listening, not over the phone. Meet me at Cafe Luna in half an hour. It's important, for both of us. I arrived at the cafe early, selecting a table in the corner that offered privacy without isolation. When Vivian walked in, I recognized her immediately, tall, elegant, with a confidence that made people notice her. She spotted me and approached, her expression a careful mask of professional detachment. Thank you for coming, I said as she sat down across from me. I'm not sure I had much choice, she replied, declining my offer of coffee with a small shake of her head. So, what's this proposition? I slid a folder across the table. Before we begin, you should know that I'm aware of your relationship with my husband. I'm also aware of your plans for this weekend. Her composure faltered slightly. Mrs. Chen, Olivia, please. And I'm not here to create a scene or demand you end the affair. What happens between you and Daniel is ultimately your decision. Confusion flickered across her face. Then why am I here? Because there are things about Daniel, and his mother, that you should know before you get any deeper into this relationship. I tapped the folder. Things that could affect your career and your future. Vivian's eyes narrowed as she opened the folder and began scanning the documents inside. Financial records, email printouts, and a detailed timeline I'd compiled overnight. What am I looking at? She asked, but the slight tremor in her voice suggested she already knew. Evidence that Daniel has been misappropriating client funds to finance his lifestyle and personal investments. Not large amounts from any single account. He's too clever for that, but small sums from dozens of clients over several years. It adds up to a significant amount, her face paled. If this is true, it's serious misconduct. It could mean disbarment, even criminal charges. It is true. And as a junior associate who's been working closely with him, your name appears on several of these client accounts. I let the implication hang in the air between us. I had nothing to do with this, she said sharply. I didn't know. I believe you. But would the ethics committee? The police? The firm's senior partners? Vivian closed the folder, her hands shaking slightly. What do you want from me? First, information. How long has the affair been going on? She hesitated, then seemed to realize honesty was her best option. 8 months since I was assigned to his team. And the plan for this weekend? We're supposed to meet tonight. He said he had to make an appearance at the office first, for appearance's sake, then we're driving to the coast. Coming back late Sunday, leaving me to host his birthday party alone with his mother conveniently out of town as well. Vivian had the grace to look uncomfortable. He said you knew he wouldn't be there, that it was just for appearances, for his work colleagues. I laughed softly. Of course he did. Tell me, did he also tell you I'm just a simple housewife? That our marriage has been over for years? That I'm difficult or cold or unambitious? Her silence was confirmation enough. Daniel has a pattern, Vivian. I wasn't the first and you won't be the last. He cultivates intelligent, ambitious women, makes them feel special, then systematically undermines their confidence while binding them to him professionally and financially. Why are you telling me this? Why not just expose him? Because I have a better plan, one that gives us both what we want. You get to protect your career and reputation, and I get revenge? She supplied. Justice, I corrected. And freedom. Here's what I'm proposing. By the time Vivian left the cafe an hour later, we had a detailed agreement. She would maintain the illusion that everything was proceeding according to plan, while actually working with me to ensure Daniel and Eleanor received exactly the birthday surprise they deserved. As I watched her walk away, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my own narrative. Back at home, deliveries continued to arrive. I directed each one with renewed purpose, knowing that tomorrow's party would indeed be memorable, just not in the way anyone expected. That evening, my phone chimed with a text from Daniel. Working late. Don't wait up, I smiled as I typed my response. No problem. Everything's ready for tomorrow. It's going to be unforgettable. His reply came quickly. You're the best. Love you. I set the phone down without responding and returned to my preparations. There was still much to do before morning. I woke before dawn on Saturday, the day of the party. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the silence of the empty house, mentally reviewing the day's schedule and my carefully constructed plan. By 7 a.m., I was dressed and ready when the doorbell rang. Denise Harmon stood on my porch, holding a sealed envelope and a tablet. Good morning, Olivia. I have the preliminary report as promised. I invited her in and offered coffee, which she accepted gratefully. It's all there, she said, handing me the envelope. Financial transactions, timeline, evidence of systematic misappropriation. It's worse than we initially thought. How much? Approximately $1.3 million over 5 years. Small amounts from numerous client accounts, all carefully concealed within legitimate transactions. He's been quite methodical, I nodded, not entirely surprised. And the trust fund? That's where it gets interesting. The trust Eleanor Chen claims to control? It was substantially depleted 3 years ago. What remains is about $90,000, nowhere near the millions she implies when making threats or promises. This information confirmed my suspicions. Eleanor's frequent reminders about Daniel's inheritance had been a manipulation tactic, a way to maintain control over both of us. What about my signature? Did you find any documents I supposedly signed but didn't? Denise swiped through several images on her tablet. At least a dozen instances where your signature appears to have been forged on financial documents, including power of attorney forms and property transfers. And this is all admissible? Legally sound? With proper forensic accounting and signature analysis, yes. I've included recommended next steps in the report, including contact information for financial crime specialists and attorneys who handle this type of case. I thanked her and wrote a check for her services. After she left, I opened my laptop and sent a series of carefully prepared emails to the State Bar Association Ethics Committee, to the managing partners at Daniel's firm, and to a financial journalist who had recently published an exposé on legal industry fraud. Each email contained select information from Denise's report, with a note that complete documentation would be provided in person at the appropriate time. Finally, I sent one more email, to myself, with all the evidence attached. Scheduled to deliver during the party that evening. At 10 a.m., the caterers arrived to begin setup. By noon, the florist had transformed our backyard tent into an elegant space with tasteful arrangements of blue and silver flowers, just as Eleanor had specified. The cake arrived at 2 p.m., a masterpiece of chocolate ganache decorated with intricate fondant designs, exactly as Eleanor had requested. Throughout the day, I received periodic texts from Vivian, confirming that Daniel believed everything was proceeding according to plan. He had told her he'd made an appearance at the office that morning to establish his alibi, then returned home to check on preparations before they would leave for their weekend. At precisely 3:30 p.m., I heard Daniel's key in the front door. I was in the kitchen, arranging a spectacular charcuterie display, when he appeared in the doorway. "Wow," he said, looking genuinely impressed as he surveyed the preparations. "This looks amazing, Liv. You've outdone yourself." "Thank you," I said, smiling. "Everything's on schedule." He nodded approvingly, then glanced at his watch. "Listen, something's come up with the Westbrook case. I need to run back to the office for a few hours." "On a Saturday afternoon? On your birthday?" He shrugged apologetically. "The partners are putting pressure on us to file by Monday. But I promise I'll be back in plenty of time for the party." "Of course you will," I said, maintaining my smile. "Your guests will be arriving at 7. "I'm sure you wouldn't want to disappoint them." "Definitely not." He hesitated, then added, "Especially not Goldstein. This party could make a real difference for my partnership track. I'm aware of how important this is for your career." He seemed relieved by my understanding. "I knew you'd get it. That's why we make such a great team." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me, but I simply nodded. "We certainly do. I should be back around 6:30, he said, already turning to leave. "Call if you need anything." "Actually," I said, causing him to pause, "there is one thing you could do before you go." "What's that?" I held out a document. "Sign this catering change order. They need authorization for the additional whiskey selection you requested." Without reading it, Daniel scrawled his signature at the bottom. "Anything else?" "No, that's all I need from you," I said, folding the paper and slipping it into my pocket. "Good luck with the Westbrook case." After he left, I returned to my preparations with renewed focus. The document Daniel had just signed wasn't a catering order. It was an authorization for a forensic accountant to access all of our financial records, including his private accounts. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. "Olivia, dear," she greeted me, her voice perfectly modulated to sound both concerned and authoritative. "How are the preparations coming along?" "Everything's perfect, Eleanor. Just as you specified. Wonderful. I'm so sorry I can't be there to help with the final touches." Margaret's condition was worse than expected. "How concerning. Will you be able to make it back for the party?" A pause. "I'm afraid not. The earliest flight I could get is tomorrow morning. But I'm sure everything will be lovely. You've always been so capable." Her condescension was palpable, but I kept my tone pleasant. "That's kind of you to say. Daniel mentioned he's wrapping up some work, but will be home by 6:30. Another pause, slightly longer. "Did he? Well, the dedication of my son never ceases to amaze me. Working even on his birthday. Indeed." "I've always admired his commitment," I replied, wondering if she knew about Vivian, about their planned escape. "Will you call him tonight to wish him happy birthday?" "Of course, dear. Around 8 p.m., I think, when the party will be in full swing. Exactly when Daniel and Vivian would be on the road to the coast. Perfect. I'll make sure he has his phone with him." After ending the call, I smiled to myself. The final pieces were falling into place. At 5 p.m., the bartenders and waitstaff arrived, followed by the jazz quartet Eleanor had insisted upon. By 6 p.m., the house and backyard had been transformed into an elegant venue worthy of the important guests who would soon arrive. I changed into the dress I'd carefully selected for the occasion, a sophisticated navy blue sheath that perfectly complemented the party's color scheme, Eleanor's choice that I'd embraced for my own reasons. At 6:30 p.m., Right on schedule, my phone chimed with a text from Daniel. Leaving office now. ETA 20 minutes. I responded with a simple, perfect. Everything is ready, and it was, though not in the way Daniel imagined. At precisely 6:45 p.m., the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, checked my appearance one last time in the hall mirror, and opened the front door with a warm smile. Judge Carmichael, Mrs. Carmichael, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. The distinguished older couple, he a federal judge known for his strong stance on white-collar crime, she a formidable philanthropist who sat on the Bar Association's ethics committee, entered with gracious smiles. Olivia, the place looks wonderful, Susan Carmichael said, handing me a elegantly wrapped gift. Robert and I wouldn't have missed Daniel's birthday for the world. He'll be so pleased you could come, I replied, guiding them toward the backyard where the bartender had begun serving pre-dinner drinks. He should be arriving any moment. Last-minute case preparations. You know how dedicated he is. Judge Carmichael nodded approvingly. That's what makes him stand out from his peers. Dedication. I introduced them to the first few guests who had already arrived, colleagues of mine from the university, rather than Daniel's law firm associates, and ensured they had drinks before returning to the door as more guests began to arrive. By 7:15 p.m., the house and backyard tent were filling with a carefully curated mix of guests, not the list Eleanor had provided, but my own revision. Present were senior partners from Daniel's firm, respected judges, Bar Association officials, financial crimes investigators, and several journalists specializing in legal and financial reporting, all under the guise of being friends of the family. Conspicuously absent were the junior associates and support staff who had comprised much of Eleanor's original list, people who would have recognized the senior partners and realized something was amiss. At 7:20 p.m., my phone chimed with a text from Vivian. We're 10 minutes away. I replied, perfect timing. Everyone's asking for him. At 7:30 p.m., I heard Daniel's key in the lock. Taking a deep breath, I moved to the entry hall just as he walked in, looking relaxed and handsome in casual. Weekend attire, definitely not dressed for the formal party visible through the open back doors. His expression shifted from confusion to shock as he took in my formal dress and the sound of the jazz quartet playing in the backyard tent. Liv, what's going on? I thought. Daniel, thank goodness you're here, I interrupted smoothly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Everyone's been asking for the birthday boy. Behind him, I could see Vivian frozen on the porch, weekend bag in hand, her face a mask of panic. Daniel turned to look at her, then back at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. Olivia, I can explain. No need, I said pleasantly, taking his arm. You're just in time. Judge Carmichael was just asking about the Westbrook case. Apparently, his clerk mentioned you'd filed the motions yesterday. Color drained from Daniel's face as I guided him firmly toward the backyard. Judge Carmichael is here? And the Westbrook filing is complete, according to him, I finished. Come, your guests are waiting. You might want to say hello to the managing partners first. They're by the bar. Daniel stopped abruptly. The partners are here? All of them? Of course. Eleanor was very specific about the guest list being a who's who of the legal community. Speaking of which, she said she'll call around 8 to wish you happy birthday. I watched as Daniel processed this information, his carefully constructed plans crumbling before his eyes. Vivian had silently retreated from the porch, following our contingency plan. I need to change, he said finally, gesturing at his casual clothes. No time, I replied, guiding him toward the party. Everyone's waiting for the toast. As we stepped into the backyard, conversations paused as guests turned to greet the guest of honor. Daniel, ever the professional, quickly assumed his public persona, smiling and thanking people for coming despite his obvious discomfort. I moved efficiently around the space, introducing Daniel to key guests and ensuring everyone had drinks and appetizers. All the while, I was aware of his growing confusion as he encountered person after person who shouldn't have been there. According to his and Eleanor's plan, people with the power to impact his career and legal standing. Precisely 8 p.m., as promised, Daniel's phone rang. He excused himself from a conversation with the State Bar Association president and stepped slightly away to answer. Though I couldn't hear the conversation, I could see the progression of emotions across his face, first relief, then confusion, followed by growing alarm as Eleanor presumably realized her son was at the party he was supposed to have abandoned. When he ended the call, Daniel looked shaken. He glanced at me across the crowded tent, seeing me for perhaps the first time that evening, not as his convenient assistant, but as someone who had orchestrated events beyond his control. I smiled and raised my glass, slightly in his direction before turning to chat with the financial crimes investigator who had arrived disguised as a university colleague. The evening was still young, and the real surprise was yet to come. By 9 p.m., the party was in full swing. The food was spectacular, the jazz quartet played sophisticated arrangements, and the whiskey tasting had proven particularly popular among the senior partners. Daniel had recovered his composure somewhat, falling back on his considerable charm and professional networking skills. To the casual observer, he appeared to be enjoying his birthday celebration, graciously accepting congratulations and engaging in animated conversations. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted periodically to his phone, likely hoping for some message from Vivian explaining what had happened to their plans. At 9:30 p.m., I clinked a spoon against my champagne glass, calling for attention. The music faded, and conversations quieted as guests turned toward me. First, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate Daniel's birthday, I began, smiling at the assembled crowd. Many of you have known Daniel for years, as a colleague, a legal adversary, or simply as a friend. But few people know him as well as I do. Daniel's smile became fixed as he watched me warily from across the tent. 7 years of marriage teaches you a lot about a person, I continued. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their passions, and sometimes their secrets. A murmur rippled through the crowd as guests sensed something unexpected was happening. Don't worry, I assured them with a light laugh. This isn't going to be one of those embarrassing spouse speeches full of private jokes and humiliating anecdotes. Relief flickered across Daniel's face, quickly replaced by wariness as I continued. Instead, I'd like to share something special with all of you, something I discovered while planning this party. I paused, meeting Daniel's gaze directly. Something that I think reveals the true measure of the man we're celebrating tonight. I nodded to one of the waitstaff. Actually, a paralegal friend from the district attorney's office who distributed champagne to those who didn't already have glasses. Before I continue, I'd like to propose a toast, I said, raising my glass, to truth and justice, the principles that guide our legal system and, supposedly, the careers of everyone in this tent. Confusion crossed many faces, but glasses were raised nonetheless. Daniel remained frozen, his glass half lifted, his eyes never leaving mine. And now, I continued after taking a sip, I'd like to share what I discovered. I nodded again, and the large screen that had been set up for a planned photo slideshow flickered to life. Instead of nostalgic photos of Daniel through the years, it displayed the first page of Denise Harmon's forensic accounting report. For those in the back who can't read the screen clearly, I said calmly, this is a certified forensic accounting report detailing the systematic misappropriation of client funds from the trust accounts at Chen, Goldstein, and Weber over the past 5 years. The silence in the tent was absolute. Every eye moved from the screen to Daniel, whose face had gone pale. Olivia, he said, his voice strained. This is hardly the time or place. I disagree, I interrupted smoothly. I can't think of a more appropriate audience for this information than the managing partners of your firm, representatives of the Bar Association, and members of the Financial Crimes Division, all of whom happen to be here tonight. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as people began to realize this was not a tasteless joke or a misunderstanding. Now, I know what you're thinking, I continued, addressing the stunned guests. This must be some kind of mistake or a vindictive wife's attempt at public humiliation. That's why I've arranged for copies of the complete report, with supporting documentation, to be delivered to each of your offices on Monday morning. The evidence is quite comprehensive. Daniel took a step toward me, his expression a mix of fury and panic. "Stop this right now," he hissed. "I'm afraid I can't do that," I replied, loud enough for others to hear. "You see, I'm legally obligated to report financial crimes when I become aware of them, especially when my own forged signature appears on some of the documents in question." The screen changed to display examples of documents bearing crude forgeries of my signature, alongside samples of my actual handwriting for comparison. And before anyone suggests this is merely a domestic dispute gone public, I added, I should mention that I've already filed formal complaints with the State Bar Association, the District Attorney's Office, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. This isn't about our marriage. It's about the law. Daniel's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the patio stones. The sound seemed to break the spell of shocked silence, and the tent erupted in a chaos of voices, demands for explanation, expressions of outrage, and the distinctive sound of law enforcement officers identifying themselves. I stepped back as two plainclothes detectives approached Daniel, speaking in low, urgent tones. He glanced wildly around the tent, looking for allies or escape routes, but finding neither. As Daniel was escorted from the tent, his professional reputation crumbling before his eyes, my phone chimed with a text. It was from Eleanor. "Flight delayed. We'll call again soon." I smiled to myself, knowing that when she did call, she would discover that her carefully constructed world of influence and manipulation had collapsed alongside her son's career. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the remaining guests, many of whom were already gathering their belongings to leave. "While this evening has taken an unexpected turn, the food and drinks will continue to be served. I apologize for any discomfort, but not for ensuring that justice is served, even when it arrives disguised as a birthday party." The next morning, I awoke in an empty house that felt both strange and liberating. Most of the party decorations remained, creating an odd juxtaposition with the silence that now enveloped the space. I made coffee and carried it to the backyard, where the elegant tent still stood. Dew glistened on the navy and silver decorations that Eleanor had insisted upon, now seeming like artifacts from someone else's life. My phone had been buzzing constantly since the previous evening, calls and texts from friends, acquaintances, and numerous unknown numbers, likely journalists who had already gotten wind of the scandal. I had turned it to silent, wanting to savor these quiet moments of transition. At precisely 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised to find Eleanor Chen standing on my porch, her travel clothes slightly rumpled but her makeup impeccable as always. "Olivia," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "What have you done?" I stepped aside to let her enter, closing the door behind her. "Would you like some coffee, Eleanor? You look tired from your trip." "Don't play games with me," she snapped, following me to the kitchen. "Daniel called me from the police station. He said you've destroyed everything, his career, his reputation, our family name." I poured coffee into a mug and placed it on the counter between us. "No, Eleanor. Daniel destroyed those things himself when he chose to steal from his clients. I merely exposed the truth." "The truth?" She scoffed. "The truth is that you've always been jealous of Daniel's success. You couldn't stand that your academic career was going nowhere while he was on track to make partner. Is that what you think this is about? Professional jealousy? What else? You could have come to us privately if you had concerns. Instead, you orchestrated this public execution." I leaned against the counter, studying my mother-in-law's face, the face of a woman who had spent decades manipulating everyone around her to maintain control. "Tell me, Eleanor, did you know about the financial fraud? About Daniel stealing from client accounts?" Her hesitation was brief but telling. "Whatever Daniel did, I'm sure he had good reason. The firm underpays him for his contributions. That's not a denial." Eleanor straightened her shoulders. "The legal profession is complicated. Sometimes arrangements are made that outsiders wouldn't understand. Outsiders like law enforcement, the bar association, the clients whose money was stolen. You've always been so black and white in your thinking, Olivia. The world doesn't work that way, especially not at Daniel's level. I smiled without humor. Actually, I think you'll find that the law is quite clear on embezzlement and fraud. But that's not the only thing Daniel was hiding, was it? Eleanor's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Vivian Zhao. The weekend getaway planned for Daniel's birthday, while you conveniently disappeared to Phoenix and I was left managing a party for people who were never actually invited. A flicker of surprise crossed Eleanor's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, Eleanor. I found the emails, the hotel reservations, everything. You knew about the affair. You helped plan their weekend escape. She remained silent for a moment, then sighed. Men have needs, Olivia. Daniel works hard. If his marriage wasn't fulfilling all aspects of his life, that's hardly my fault. The casual cruelty of her statement should have hurt. But instead, I felt only a detached fascination at her ability to justify anything that served her purposes. And what about the trust fund? The millions you've been dangling over our heads for years? The money that was supposedly going to secure Daniel's future as a partner in the firm? Now genuine alarm flashed in Eleanor's eyes. What about it? It's gone. Most of it anyway. Spent years ago on your luxury cruises, your designer wardrobes, your cosmetic procedures. The forensic accountant found everything, Eleanor. All the transfers, all the deceptions. She gripped the edge of the counter. You had no right to investigate my personal finances. Actually, I had every right, especially after discovering Daniel had forged my signature on joint financial documents. But that's beside the point. The truth is, there is no trust fund anymore, just a fiction you've been using to control Daniel, and by extension, me. Eleanor seemed to age before my eyes, the polished facade cracking to reveal the desperate woman beneath. What happens now? She asked, her voice suddenly smaller. Daniel was released on bail this morning, though his passport has been surrendered. The firm has already issued a statement distancing themselves from him and promising a full internal investigation. The criminal case will take months, possibly years, to resolve. And you? What do you get out of this? This destruction? I considered her question seriously. Freedom, truth, a chance to rebuild my life without deception. You could have divorced him quietly if you were unhappy. You didn't have to ruin him. This was never about my happiness, Eleanor. It was about justice. Daniel stole more than money from his clients. He stole their trust. He betrayed his professional oath. And yes, he betrayed our marriage. Actions have consequences. Eleanor gathered her composure, straightening her shoulders again. Well, I hope you're satisfied. The Chen family name is now synonymous with scandal thanks to you. No, thanks to Daniel's choices. And yours. She picked up her handbag. I'll be staying at the Westmont Hotel while this situation develops. I assume you'll be filing for divorce? The papers were drawn up weeks ago. My attorney will be contacting Daniel's legal team tomorrow. Eleanor paused at the kitchen door. You know, I never thought you were right for Daniel. Too independent, too opinionated. I told him so from the beginning. On that point, Eleanor, we finally agree. I wasn't right for the man you raised Daniel to be. Someone who values appearance over substance, who believes rules apply to everyone but himself. I smiled thinly. But I was exactly right for this moment. The moment when truth finally mattered more than appearances. After Eleanor left, I returned to the backyard with my coffee. The tent that had been intended as a showcase for Daniel's professional aspirations now stood as a monument to their collapse. My phone chimed with a text message from Vivian. Thank you for the warning last night. I've spoken with the investigators this morning. Doing the right thing feels better than I expected. I smiled, genuinely happy that at least one other person had found clarity in this chaos. As I began the process of dismantling the party decorations, I felt lighter than I had in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was truly mine to shape. 3 months after the birthday party that ended my marriage, I stood in the empty living room of our, now my house. The furniture had been rearranged, family photos replaced with artwork I'd always loved but Daniel had dismissed as too abstract. The space felt different, cleaner somehow, as if the truth had aired out years of accumulated tension. The legal proceedings against Daniel were progressing steadily. He had been indicted on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and financial misconduct. Several former clients had also filed civil suits. His career was effectively over, regardless of the eventual criminal verdict. Eleanor had retreated to Phoenix permanently, her carefully constructed social standing in shambles after journalists uncovered additional financial improprieties involving her charitable foundation. The last I'd heard, she was claiming health issues to avoid public appearances. Vivian had cooperated fully with investigators, providing crucial evidence in exchange for immunity. She had left the firm and, according to mutual acquaintances, was considering a career change to corporate compliance, a field where her first-hand experience with legal ethics violations would be particularly valuable. As for me, I had accepted a visiting professor position at an art history department in Barcelona, starting next semester, a fresh start in a city I'd always loved, far from the whispers and sidelong glances that still followed me here. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. When I opened it, I found Denise Harmon standing on my porch, a folder tucked under her arm. "May I come in?" she asked, her practical haircut and no-nonsense blazer unchanged since our first meeting. I led her to the kitchen, where the afternoon sun streamed through windows that seemed brighter without Eleanor's heavy drapes. "I have updates," Denise said, opening her folder. The forensic team completed their final analysis of the financial records. The total amount misappropriated was actually closer to $1.8 million, even worse than we initially thought. I nodded, no longer surprised by the extent of Daniel's deception. "And the recovery process?" "That's actually why I'm here." Denise smiled slightly. "The firm has agreed to make full restitution to all affected clients, to avoid further damage to their reputation. And as part of that agreement, they've acknowledged that you were instrumental in uncovering the fraud. I didn't do it for acknowledgement." "Perhaps not, but there's something else." She slid a document across the table. "This is notification of a whistleblower award from the SEC. They've determined that you're entitled to a percentage of the recovered funds and penalties." I scanned the document, my eyes widening at the figure listed. This can't be right. It is. Approximately $400,000 after taxes. The Commission takes financial fraud very seriously, especially when it affects multiple clients over several years. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel's crimes had ultimately funded my new beginning, just as Eleanor's trust fund had supposedly been intended to do. I don't know what to say. Denise closed her folder. "You don't need to say anything. But if I may offer a suggestion, use it well. Build the life you want, not the one someone else designed for you." After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal had been painful, the public exposure uncomfortable, but the freedom that followed was worth every difficult moment. My phone chimed with a notification, an email confirming my apartment rental in Barcelona, complete with photos of sun-drenched rooms overlooking a quiet plaza. As I scrolled through the images of my future home, I realized something important. The party I had planned hadn't failed. It had simply celebrated a different kind of birthday than intended. Not Daniel's 43rd year, but my own rebirth, as someone who would no longer accept deception, who would no longer shrink herself to fit into someone else's expectations. I walked through the house one last time, mentally saying goodbye to the life I had lived here. Tomorrow, the real estate agent would list the property. Next week, I would begin packing for my move to Spain. And next month, I would start teaching again, not as Daniel Chen's wife or Eleanor Chen's daughter-in-law, but simply as Dr. Olivia Reeves, finally the author of her own story. As I stepped onto the back patio where the party tent had once stood, I raised an imaginary glass to the future, to truth, to justice, and most importantly, to second chances. The celebration Eleanor and Daniel had planned had been a sham, but my own private party was just beginning. And this time I was the only guest who mattered.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.